Phones are all live. They should be able to pick you up just fine.
Okay. Sorry about being late. Welcome to our monthly Public Art Commission meeting. Let's start with roll call. Commissioner Zelka.
Here.
Commissioner Olmsted. It's not here. Commissioner Miyaji.
Here.
Commissioner Gordon.
Here.
And Commissioner Taylor.
Here.
All right. I think we are ready to get started. Do we have any requests for changes to the agenda? Any additions, deletions?
No.
No? Okay. Any public comments? No. All right. So our first order of business is the approval of minutes from the 17th.
So moved.
I second.
Okay, we are approved.
We'll ask for a motion.
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
I have a motion to approve the minutes from the 17th.
Yeah.
And
So
a second from Commissioner Zelka.
Mr. Zelka.
And then
So
all in favor.
All in favor?
any corrections or additions?
I missed this one, so.
Aye. In favor.
Okay. All in favor.
We're good.
All right. So staff comments.
We also have the second set of minutes
We
from
have the
Friday,
we do.
September 11th from the retreat.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the retreat.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved.
They were short and sweet.
Have fun.
Keep it to the point.
It was.
One quick question. Wasn't Dara at the meeting also?
For the retreat?
Yeah. Was she
I
not
think
there?
it said in there that she was there and then left. at one
Oh,
point.
okay. Because under Commissioner's present doesn't have her name, so I don't know. Does it?
Oh no, that
Dara
was no, that
unfortunately
was the
missed the
other.
retreat.
Yeah, that
She
was
did?
the other
Oh, I
one.
thought she was there. Okay. Sorry.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Okay.
I was thinking of the 430 Forest Avenue minutes from the last one. Sorry.
Sorry. I got confused.
Always good to check. Okay, so for staff comments, we've had a pretty busy week out here in our front yard of City Hall. So the deinstallation of Aurora began at the end of the month. October 5th, we brought in the crane and hauled out the final pieces. And there she is getting disassembled and craned out over Hamilton onto a truck. So that was Monday. We got her completely out. And then Thursday the 8th. Oh, okay. So Thursday the 8th, and I think Commissioner Zelka saw this coming in on the truck pretty close by. We installed Bruce Beasley's Rondo 1. Staff is planning an event for an October 29th celebration for the arrival of Rondo at 5:30 p.m. on King Plaza. We will have live music. It should be a pretty fun and festive event. Of course, Mr. Beasley will be here. There it is being craned into place. And so, as you recall, it will remain in place until September 2016. So mark your calendars for that October 29th at 5:30. And then October 8th was also the last appearance by Mobile Arts Platform as part of our artist-led outreach for the Public Art Master Plan. So their final appearance was at the Meet the Street event. So that afternoon they were on Cogswell Plaza and interacting with many of the residents of Avenidas as well. And so here they are at the Meet the Street event with Mayor Holman. Thanks to all of you who volunteered and helped them along the way. It was really, some of those sites were really very, very busy with lots of engagement, and we really appreciate all the help that you all gave. Many of you volunteered more than once, and a couple of you are triple volunteer, so my hat's off to you. We're coordinating a presentation of the findings, and we're targeting for the evening of our next Public Art Commission meeting to have them present their findings and the project outcome. So we're targeting November 19th. So in our next agenda setting meeting, perhaps we look at doing a special meeting at 6 p.m. to take care of any business or action items And then perhaps followed by 7 p.m. a presentation and a reception, and have a little fun and see what they came up with. So that's it for staff comments this evening.
Okay. And we're going to do a review of the budget.
Okay, so you should have 2 sheets in front of you. So let's start with the Art and Public Places CIP budget. It looks like this. So as you go down, actual costs, so there were some additional costs with the master plan, the project management for the artist-led outreach. Then below that you see our commitments. So those are all items that are encumbered under contract but not yet paid out. And then we have earmarked the potential project for the University Avenue tunnels for $30,000. So of what we have encumbered, we still have $77,000 left in the budget. If we do end up utilizing that $30,000 toward the University Avenue tunnel project, then that leaves us with $47,000, a little over $47,000 in that CIP budget. Are there any questions thus far? Okay. So if you flip that page over, the municipal CIP, so this is the percent for art funding in municipal projects. So we have $5,000 left there for the artist-led engagement. Left to pay out, you see the previous payment of $5,000. So those are the only projects that have come out of there thus far, leaving us with $179,000 there. And then you see the funds that are earmarked for future projects, but those are not yet encumbered. For the municipal golf chorus, and the commission had earmarked a second series of funds. There was originally talk about having 2 separate artist-led engagement projects. And so we didn't initiate that. We went with Mobile Arts Platform within those time constraints, but that is still there. And so at a future point, we may decide if we want to do another similar type of project. Are there any questions on the Muni CIP budget? Okay. And then the other one's the maintenance budget. It's a separate sheet. So the actual costs this year, we've paid out a little over $8,000. Commitments, items that are under contract, a little over $17,000. So it means we've spent a little over $25,000 of the maintenance funding. And then there you see some potential projects that may be on the horizon, which would leave us with a little over $9,000 in the maintenance budget. And as a reminder, those maintenance funds do not roll over from year to year. So we want to spend them.
The phase 2 condition assessment that we approved last month, has that started?
The contract is underway currently, right?
It was actually completed today, and the field trips will start on, I believe, October 31st.
Cool.
So,
That's
good.
Yeah.
So we're excited to get that moving, and then we can evaluate that and hopefully initiate phase 3.
Cool.
And then have it all assessed, which would be wonderful.
That's great.
Any budget questions on any of these?
But I just a quick question about can you refresh my memory about what we decided? We increased the budget for Joyce for the golf course, and we sort of, to be able to do something more substantial, the initial budget was X, and we added some. I don't know what we decided.
The original budget was $24. Yeah.
Okay.
And so the project has been on hold. There's been some changeover in the staff at the golf course, so it's been on hold. We're actually scheduled to have a phone meeting with her next week. So
Okay.
we'll see if we can bring that back to life here pretty soon.
All right. Okay.
Okay. So you said total for that was $24K?
It was $24,000, and then the commission allocated additional funds so that she could do something a little bit more impactful, because in the scale of the project, that's really small.
Yeah. Got it. Thanks.
And this is this has to be spent, is this fiscal year? This is until June as well, to spend the 9,000?
The maintenance budget?
Mhm.
Yes, it's fiscal year.
Okay. So you're not under pressure to, like, you have these that are not under contract, the 2140,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not under pressure to spend it by the end of the calendar year.
No.
Okay.
No.
Cool.
And with the maintenance budget, we tend to leave some reserve in there until late, just in case there's some sort of emergency.
Cool.
All right, so we have 2 action items. The first is 2515, 2585 Camino. So final review and approval of the artwork with this development project. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So the project here, and we do have representatives from the owners, the architects, and we do have Rob Lay here, who's going to come up and join me in just a second, I hope. So tonight we are seeking final review and approval of the artwork proposed by Rob Lay for this property. The project came for initial review in March of 2015, and we used the information there to initiate the artist selection process, which we've undertaken, clearly. So just as a refresher of the site, along El Camino, and it's bordered by Grant and Sherman. If you look across Grant, right, there's that motel there, there's an alleyway. And then there are those large parking lots that people typically park in to go visit the various shops on California Avenue and the farmers market. So it's a very, very busy site. So here it's currently the Olive Garden site. And so this gives you a sense of how the project is oriented. And so the project would demolish the existing structure and replace it with a 3-story mixed-use building with 1 level of below-ground parking, commercial space, and 13 residential condominiums. There was a small error in the staff report in which I wrote they have not quite completed site and design review. That is coming shortly. Then they will go to planning and transportation soon, and then begin the ARB process hopefully in November or December. So in looking at, so there's the view from El Camino, and this is the view from Sherman. So this would be, for instance, across like the parking lot where most people might see it if they're parked back there going to the farmer's market coming from that alleyway. And a lot of the input we heard from the Public Art Commission really helped us nail down that the El Camino side was not going to be fruitful, that this space would offer much more visibility and pedestrian experience. So the Public Art Commission suggestions, just to refresh, to be considerate of limited space, appropriate scale. There was a desire for something that's kinetic, interactive, activating the space, and the pedestrian experience. So those are all things we took into consideration when we were putting together the list of artists. Unfortunately, when you're talking about something on this kind of scale, to create something that is kinetic, would be on a much larger, it would be a much larger commitment as far as maintenance. And also it's a much larger budget item to do something on that scale. But we definitely really wanted to look at that pedestrian experience. And there were a number of suggestions about how we might do that in that plaza. So we looked a lot at that plaza, thought about, do we want to have sculptures in the plaza? Do we want to have something integrated with the windows? Do we want to have something integrated with the building? So we ended up, in compelling, this one. So the artist selection process, let me share a little bit of that. So based on the input and meetings with the owners and the architect, staff chose 17 potential artists for the owners and the architect to review. The panel selected 4 of those to interview, then selected Rob Lay as the finalist. His in-depth experience with public art and clean aesthetic really drew the team. Rob's flowing artworks and sense of motion intrigued the team to see what he might propose for the site. The site we selected would maximize the visibility of the work from the active parking lots of California Avenue, create a dynamic pedestrian experience while alleviating some of the common maintenance and liability concerns associated with a ground-mounted artwork, and allow the artist to play a little bit with the geometry of the building. So a little bit about Rob, and you have a detail of his piece May to September on the right. He's an architect by training. He spent some time in Cliff Garton's studio. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Cliff Garton's public artwork, but he's a pretty prolific artist. And then in 2003, he founded his own public art studio, Urbana Studio. Here's a little bit about his current teaching and grants and awards. So, and here you see May to September. Looks different from a different angle. So that will come into play later. And here is the larger piece, May to September. You can see it's an enormous piece, 2014, 6,500 colored aluminum panels. And so the piece changes as you see it from different directions. And this comes into play because he uses a similar technique with the proposal that you're going to review today. This is a piece called Pseudo-Random in New York in the Hewlett-Packard headquarters there. And it's actually made out of corian. And half of the piece is inside and then half of it flows out through the door. This piece of draper is 70 feet tall. It goes up 5 floors. So it's 50 strips wide. It goes up 5 floors. And you can really start to see this theme of flow and fluidity, and really sort of bringing to mind natural elements in a variety of materials. Lumenscape 2009, so this is in a transit station in Los Angeles. So this is with acrylic and colored LED. So you can see how well he's been able to translate this style into many different environments, and work in multiple media. And Floating Point 2013. So this is in Emeryville. Again, a very different kind of style, but you can still see, Rob's flow, his line and precision there. So the team really responded to him very, very favorably. And we determined this was the ideal location, mounted on the building. You can see where we would light it from across the way, so at night there would be a different experience. And I think we're ready to introduce Rob Lay to talk about Emergence.
Hi. Well, that was nice. I don't often get to sit behind someone as I explain my work. But wish you could take you around everywhere. That would be really nice. So nice to meet everybody. As Elise was showing some of the work, I think you picked good photos to show, because I would say that a lot of what, as an artist, my sense is that a lot of the work that I do, at least, is always about trying to find a balance between interests that I have that may be really universal and don't really apply specifically to a particular location in the world, and how that starts to balance with sort of the specifics of a particular place. And some often, and I think all those works that you guys just saw are often really driven by certain different types of phenomenon. Sometimes, you describe it as kind of flowing, and I think that's certainly not a bad way of describing it. Sometimes those phenomenon are natural, and other times those phenomenon are also based in technology, which a lot of these works, there's kind of like what you see in the end, which I think is really important, but there's also, for me, a really interesting component as to how they're made, and there's usually a really strong technological kind of set of tricks, let's say, that's also responsible for how the forms become the way that they are. And I don't think it's important necessarily that people know that. You should just be able to judge it for what it is and not have to know the backstory necessarily, but I think it's certainly one of the reasons why I was really excited about this particular project, because I'm from Los Angeles, but I have family in the Bay Area, so I'm here quite a bit, and I know I'm certainly familiar with the history of Palo Alto and kind of the incubator kind of quality in terms of technology, both with Stanford and entire industry over the last several decades. So I was really excited to kind of take that on. Should we go maybe? Yeah. So I think I mentioned phenomenon before. There was something that I started last year working with Hewlett Packard in New York that got me. So I've started getting really interested in, and it has to do with a type of emergence. And emergence, a lot of you are maybe familiar with it. Really is a way where really complex phenomenon can start to show up from something, and sometimes it shows up in life sciences. So if you think of how a snowflake forms from, it starts with a piece of dust and water condenses and freezes, but it makes these kind of course, really exquisite, very mathematically precise crystalline forms that are completely unique. Sometimes emergence also applies to something like a flower or a butterfly that comes out of a cocoon, and these are different ways, at least in life sciences, that emergence can be explained. And there's also an aspect of emergence that has very much to do with technology and computation and mathematics. And if any of you remember the movie, that's a Beautiful Mind, which was based on a true story, which was based on a gentleman that, because of the way he was able to think, he could see patterns in sets of numbers that no one else could sort of see. So that, in some ways, with the Hewlett Packard piece that was shown, the term pseudo-random in that case was a phenomenon which I've always found really interesting. Is when you ask a computer to come up with a random number, it's technically impossible, because a random is a human construct that's the opposite of logic, and you're asking a computer, which is entirely logical, to come up with this. And so over the years, programmers have come up with different tricks to make a kind of a pseudo-random number, but if you were to play it out long enough, a pattern forms. And so that was in some way the basis of that piece. And I think even kind of as it starts to develop with here, in some ways it's even more appropriate, I think, the study of something that not only emerges in a conceptual way. I think with the Hewlett Packard piece, it was more about a pattern that emerges. And I think that one of the things that I found really exciting with this particular site was there's both a let's say a city-based idea of emergence, which as I said could tie itself back to computation and big data and things that people tend to associate with Palo Alto. But even in a more localized way, if you look at the way an opportunity where the art could start to really play off of something that gets established on the architecture. So I really appreciated this grid pattern that shows up, not only in the immediate vicinity behind the artwork, but also the way that there's kind of a logic throughout the entire building, where the window heights are not coincidentally based in a similar kind of pattern. And I looked at this really as a way artistically of using a canvas that has this rigidity to it and allowing a whole other pattern to start to emerge out of it. So, and I don't remember, so this is, what you're looking at here would be a view that no one would see, let's say, necessarily, because this is above the piece if you're kind of in a helicopter or up high, a drone, looking down, though. Most likely, if we were to, it probably would have been better to flip this the other way, because you certainly could see this looking up. You could stand underneath it and look up. But what this rendering is trying to show, though, is you see that grid pattern that's behind, and these elements that start to grow at first perpendicular off of this facade, and it starts to extrude. And as they are allowed to continue to grow, they start to take on these varying angles. You could, in some ways, maybe in an abstract way, you could relate this back to how a plant comes out of the ground and then leaves start to bloom. But it's very much driven algorithmically in such a way where some of these grow at a very slow rate, and you see, like towards the bottom, they're very small little pieces of aluminum. And then, of course, you see in the other areas, they are much more kind of dense and longer. And then I think the color, so if this is kind of an artificial view if you were to look straight on. But the color is similar to, picks up a technique I developed last year with the piece, the May-September piece, where in a kind of a simple way, a blue color is applied to one side of the material and a green color is applied on the other. And so what that creates is a prismatic effect. So depending on where you're standing, you see either all blue. Do we? Oh, wait. I guess we don't have those in here. Or did I? Can you? I don't know if I hit the end. But yeah. But the idea is that that the experience. Elise mentioned the idea of it being kinetic, and I think that something being dynamic or kinetic or interactive. There's different ways, and this can occur. There's the way, a very direct way, and I've worked on pieces like this where the piece literally moves. It spins or it bends or it has kind of a robotic or a kind of biomorphic quality to it. The other way that you can start to engage things that are interactive is you understand that the viewer is actually going to move. And so someone's going to walk down the street or ride by on a bicycle or ride by in a bus or a car. And so part of what I'm excited about this piece at a smaller scale is to create something that when you're looking obliquely across the sidewalk, you see this kind of these light blue or light green colors. And I'm not sure if we have a rendering in here, but as you move around it, or even if you're someone that's able to stand on the balcony up there, you start to see a much more vivid sort of hue of blue as it continues through.
And because the outside cladding of the building is aluminum, there's also some play there
Correct,
with the light that gets reflected, and if some of the panels in the artwork might also be left a little bit, as though the piece is emerging. So it may be, while the piece is in that geometry of the building, it would emerge in a more organic kind of way, visually. So sometimes, depending on the ambient light, and how much sun reflection may be getting in there, that the piece would be dynamic. And while it is not a kinetic piece, it certainly gives you a sense of a piece that is different every time you look at it, and evokes a sense of movement.
Mm-hmm.
So we're open for any questions the commissioners may have. We do have a representative here from Hayes Group Architecture as well. If you had other questions, I think we have a material sample of the aluminum, but that's our presentation.
If
Can
you
you
have,
go back to the street view one? Yeah, perfect.
Sure.
and that's Sherman.
Yes, so this would be across Sherman at the edge of that parking lot. So it would have really high visibility. And as I said, we did play with various ideas of putting something in the plaza. There were concerns about circulation, about liability, climbability. But once Rob really was on board with this idea of playing with the architecture, and it just raises the visibility of the piece. And does open up that plaza, so we're really thrilled with the idea.
Is there a view you have that shows it, like how much, like a cross section, like how much it protrudes from the wall? Is it this much, that much?
No, it's probably about this much.
That's the biggest.
Yeah, maybe 6 to 9 inches. Yeah.
But you'd see it if you were walking towards it and you didn't have this kind of profile view. You'd see kind of this undulating thing.
Correct, and so all the pieces themselves, if you look at that, they're all little rectangles and squares, and so at and this is something you probably, if you were, as Elise was showing some of my past work, this is an interest and kind of a motivation I have in all of my work. I'm always really interested in a kind of a part-to-whole relationship and how lots of little elements or little pieces can aggregate and actually start to form something that can be read as a product of all of those things. And so, in the same way that the architecture has kind of a very orthogonal kind of sensibility to it, the pieces themselves also, if we were to just look at them like on a table, would be something that looks like this, where they're just a rectangle. And part of, an interest I have, this isn't maybe the best view to see it, is how you can start to get flowing kind of more organic shapes out of things that themselves are actually very orthogonal. Yeah. And we, and there was some, what you're seeing also is the end I think of a number of conversations that were going on. There were earlier versions of this which were, wider than it was tall. Earlier versions also kind of, didn't fit within the grid. Were kind of living more on the side of the building, more like moss would live on the side of a tree. Mm-hmm. And I think we found that through that kind of development process, there was something that seemed to click and work much better when it seemed to be aware of this kind of the architecture and the grid that was behind it. Mm-hmm. And I would even say that even the idea of emergence, where it has to look as if it's coming out of it or growing out of the ground, and that didn't happen when it was just kind of all over the place. Think of it more like a planter bed or something where you're growing something that's natural, but it's still in a kind of a tame, kind of controlled way. I think I don't know if that's a good way of saying it, but
You mentioned that one side's going to be painted green.
That's
Which ones are all of them going to be painted green on one side, or just certain ones?
Yeah. So I'll answer it in two ways. They would all be, let's say the right side would always be painted green. So from the street you would see it as green, and from the left side would be blue. So as you walk into that kind of public courtyard, you would see a combination of both.
And what shade of green?
Well, okay, so this is the other part. I don't like showing colors in renderings so much because it's off, it's wrong. There's like other things like reflections, which I'm often surprised. I'll spend year or years on a piece and really try to. I really like to have control over everything, and so often I've found at the end there's so many qualities I didn't count on, and fortunately in a good way, at least to date, there's been things I've been really happy about, and way better than the renderings. And color is one of those things as well.
Oh, yeah.
That I'll send it, and to me on my screen it looks blue, and to somebody else it looks blue-green or just green, and so I would say that blue and green have been chosen because that works, I think, in a strategic way with the architecture. But the actual, there's going to be a little bit of experimentation once I get into the kind of fabrication phase to really dial in exactly what those hues should be.
Okay, well that's I like that because if you went with royal blue and Kelly green, let's say,
yeah,
and they may not work at all.
Correct.
On that building with the reflections.
Or even
that
the
you're
sky.
talking
I mean,
about, and light hitting
how
it
the
and
sky
all.
looks
Mm-hmm.
is quite different, and
But we're looking for things that'll work well with that aluminum. So no, I don't think we're looking at this kind of green
Right.
that
Sure.
would be there. But we are looking within this sort of color family of, probably a more subtle green that plays with the aluminum. But
And will
some
the
of that's
paint
going to be
have some sort of a
trial.
sheen on it, or
yeah, it's most likely going to be powder coated because
Okay.
this is something that's
not going to be a high
last decades.
reflectability then?
Well, I don't know yet. I don't know. I'm not sure. I wouldn't say finish is another one of those things that's impossible to try to convey in a computer. Like whether something is matte or it's shiny makes a huge difference. But you have to just kind of see it. I mean, I will tell you, artistically, there's a little bit of a interesting yin and a yang with this, in that the piece works best when there's contrasting colors. But then to what degree those colors should contrast becomes an issue. So yellow and black would be phenomenal in terms of showing the variability, because those two colors are the most contrasting you can get, but then they're not appropriate for what this is. And so a lot of what the kind of color searching is trying to balance that, the contrast issue, and also having it look like it, in some ways it's part of the building, but then it should also have a degree of autonomy from the building. So it's a very involved kind of process.
Well, and it's like you were saying, on a computer screen, you show 10 people, and you're going to get 10 different answers of what the colors are.
Correct.
So
Correct.
Until you actually get it on the building,
Yeah.
that's going to be the real telling point of
Yes.
what it's going to be. Now, I like the scale of it. It's, 8 by 12?
That's correct, yeah.
I like the scale of it. I think it's big enough to where it's going to be seen from the street, people driving by, riding by on their bicycle, whatever. It's going to be, I think, you'll be able to see it, and it's going to draw your eye to it. So I really like that part of it. I like the
Thank you.
scale of it, too. Now, I'm really, I want to see what the final colors and what the outcome of that's going to be, because that's going to be, I think, a real key point of what this piece is.
Yeah, agreed.
Or although I like your concept here.
So I have two questions, and I have to say your piece is really growing on me a lot. I really like it. At first, I Just trying
We'll
to
keep
kind of
looking.
figuring it all out. Yeah, there's like, and especially when you see it on these two different screens, you see different things as well. So my two questions are: first, the building. Is it the building also going to be white? Is that, or is it like an off-white color? That was my first one.
We have the materials. That exterior cladding is in aluminum,
Aluminum. Okay.
right? So that's the intent with the piece, that we're playing with the aluminum of the building and some of that reflection. So we do have some material samples here.
So on the screen, it looks quite a lot whiter than I think it is. And then the second question is, in terms of at night, have you thought about lighting and whether what type of lighting will be used?
Yeah, this is, what I found with this is that the lighting is, sometimes some pieces it's really important how it's lit. This I found actually works really well in an ambient kind of environment. So during the day it works really well because these colors kind of bounce around inside of each other. We have had discussions about, of course, making the experience at night be something that would be certainly different than this. And I think the idea at the moment, you had a plan that was the wall that's opposite.
So it would be up here facing that way.
So it would be kind of like essentially a single spotlight that's shaped so that it's not spilling out, beyond where it needs to go. Yeah. But it would also hit it at a certain angle that's not straight on, because that's, at night for it to start to pick up shadows maybe in a way that it doesn't during the day, I think could be really interesting.
And will you get reflection off that wall that the light is on as well?
Well, I think the idea would be that the fixture is able to be shaped in such a way that it's not spilling off. And I think that what we're talking about is the light fixture, it's listed as above here.
Right, so it would be on that second
correct.
story, sort of on the same plane with the artwork.
Yeah, so it's not going to be kind of bouncing and coming back down to the ground again as well.
Interesting.
Just out of interest, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm interested to know how the installation works. These are all separate pieces, so you are placing them during the install?
Yeah, so we've talked about that. They wouldn't be installed separately on site. This would be something that, what's for sure is that I would bring them to the site in either 2 large or maybe 4 medium-sized panels, like quadrants.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
So it's 98% assembled in my studio. And then we've been coordinating along with the architects to, just at a nuts and bolts level, what's the best way to do it so that it looks really integrated. And,
Yes.
There's some waterproofing issues that go along with that. So that's all going to get sorted out. But the idea would be that, we're talking a dozen bolts maybe that holds everything together, let's say, when it's all said and done. So installation would be a 1-day affair.
Wow, that's great. And how light is the piece then?
It's entirely aluminum, so on one hand that gives you a sense it's about as lightweight as it can be given something that's as durable as aluminum. But these things tend to be, when you ask how much building components weigh, it's always a funny question because something that's lightweight could still be 1,000 pounds relatively.
Well, it's a big piece.
Yeah, it's a big piece. So I don't know just yet, but I think. In terms of how it changes things structurally on the building, I think would be pretty minor, if at all. Yeah.
Low maintenance,
Yeah, low maintenance.
Yeah.
very low maintenance.
Yeah.
After the drought, you could hit it with a hose, but before that, probably need an air gun to clean
No,
up.
I think you could host. There are some similarities for sure with this piece that Lisa had shown, a much larger facade I did at a hospital in Indianapolis, and they had they had a 50-year requirement that it be durable for 50 years. And that's in a part of the country where it snows and ices and it faces the south, and it was about as extreme of an environment as you can kind of have to design and build something in. So that project helped me figure out a lot of things to make sure that it works pretty well. So I think you could hose it off. I think anything you could do to the building, you could do to the art.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's probably low maintenance and it won't take that much to do with it.
Great.
Not a lot of snow here, so we don't have to worry about it.
We have that covered.
So far.
Yeah.
Global warming.
I like the way it's funny when you it looks a little bit like moss, because you have this thing that was very severe metal siding, very rectilinear, and you have this thing that's kind of undulating and soft that's done with aluminum. I think it's a great
Oh, thank
implementation. So bravo.
Yeah, my questions were already asked. I had questions about installation as well, because it does look like they're growing. It looks like it's flashing, growing out of the building itself.
Yeah.
So it's like flashing that's come to life in a really wonderful way. So, thank you for the proposal.
Great.
It's exciting.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are approved.
Great.
Thank you for
Thank
coming.
Thank you for your
Thank you, guys.
presentation.
Yeah,
That
thank
was
you.
great.
Thank you,
Really
guys.
Makes a big difference when you talk about it.
So what time frame are we looking at?
2 weeks. No, I'm joking.
I think that's up to
By Halloween, it'll be up, right?
we'll be
a whole other series of questions
You know,
for a different commission.
The serious answer is that it'll be coordinated with, once the kind of the architecture schedule is ironed out, it'll be coordinated so it's being fabricated at the same time.
Like 18 months, 24 months.
Well, they're still going through the ARB, they still have to get their other approvals. The idea is they would like to get all the approvals by March 30th. If the new cap would apply to this, they would need to have those in hand by then. And then we'll see where we are.
Okay.
But there will be, obviously some changes to the project as it evolves. So we'll keep you posted.
Yes.
Elise, what was the budget for this one?
I think it was 100.
This is, so it's $80,000 for the artwork.
That's great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Nice meeting you. Look forward to it.
Anyway, I appreciate you coming out. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Have a good meeting.
Thank you.
We always have fun at our meetings.
So our next item is the temporary art on King Plaza.
Is there a restroom in the building?
Yeah, just go left
Just
and then right.
behind that elevator bank.
Okay, great.
Is that familiar to anyone? Been
Floating like that.
It's scary. It's great.
I kind of liked it floating. I
Yeah,
thought, okay, let's
sure.
just keep the street closed in the crane.
Well, in that photograph, you don't see the crane that much either.
You
so
can just see the ball. It's a
Yeah.
little camouflaged.
Well, it's funny when the email went out and it had that image, you look at it and you say, "Oh, what's going on?"
So, if you'll recall, this process kicked off in the commission meeting in July, in which staff came forward with a series of proposals for the next 2 years. Those 4 installations over the next 2 years for King Plaza. At the time, the Public Art Commission allocated funds for the Beasley piece, so we could move ahead with that, and for artist George Zisiadis to create a prototype for the ball pit proposal. So this is just walking you through, just so you can remember the names and the pieces. So Dan Gottwald and Scott Watkins, this is the chime musical piece that we're anticipating putting within the trees simultaneously with Rondo while it's still there. So there's something, sort of fun and interactive in the summer. And this was the concept drawing for George Zisiadis' ball pit. And then this is Aaron Lee Benson. This is not the actual piece he's going to make. He is working with us on a specific proposal, and we would invite the community to come help build it with him. So it should be a really fun process, and if you'll recall, he donates all the lumber to Habitat for Humanity at the end of the period of time. So due to time constraints, now that I circled back to Mr. Zisiadis about creating the prototype, he's not going to be able to get to the prototype until after the new year. And Aaron Lee Benson's schedule fills up rather quickly. So what I'm proposing, so let's show the original schedule. So this was the original proposed calendar that came before you in July. And so what I'm proposing is that we flip, go ahead to the next one, right? So essentially what we're doing is flipping the last 2 installations, and Beasley shifted back a month because it took a little longer to initiate that first change out than we anticipated. So that's what I'm here to ask for today, that we allocate funds to go ahead and get into a contract with Aaron Lee Benson. I will be coming back to ask for the funds for Chime, and once we know that George Zisiadis' prototype is a viable project, then I will come back to ask for the funds for that. So today, what I'm requesting of the Public Art Commission is $10,000 for Aaron Lee Benson's contract and an additional $1,500 for some of the associated permits for a total allocation of $11,500.
Any questions?
Refresh my memory just a bit here. The Chime will run concurrently with Beasley through the summer?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it's very temporary. We're
Yeah.
doing that week to week to see how it weathers, but we liked the idea of having a musical element within the trees with the graceful loops of Rondo 1.
Okay.
And for the ball pit, we allocated how much for the study? Remember, I believe it was.
For the
It
prototype,
was 1,500 for
Yeah,
the prototype.
I remember it being reasonable. Okay, thanks.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, then we have one non-action item, an update on the work behind you.
Susan or Julie, which will be appearing up on those screens. So the studio's been hard at work with their programming. I do have a little sneak peek to show you of one of the modes. This is sort of the artistic direction it's taking. It's very, very small here. Keep in mind that is what would be across all 10 of the screens.
Wait. I'm sorry.
So I just have a quick question. I just noticed now, I thought the screen was going to be a little bit lower. So will there, I mean, for younger kids, I mean, they're not going to obviously be able to touch it as, so is it?
Those are not the touch screens.
Those aren't, I didn't think so.
The
Screens
touch,
Okay.
the
Sorry.
touch
Yeah.
screens, you see that lower
Can you
screen to the
mention-
left of revenue collections?
Yeah. Oh, that's it, okay.
That's the touch
Okay.
screen, and there will be the camera in that alcove. So you can take your picture and submit it, and then you'll see it
Okay,
pop up on the
thank you.
screen.
Okay, that confused me a little bit.
Okay,
Thanks.
so this should give you a little bit of a sense of what the movement and some of the colors she's playing with. So this is what it would look like, and there is very small text in there. So there are various stories and feeds. So for instance, the green would be Palo Alto generated stories, feeds, comments. Blue would be national, and white would be global. And so when you go to the interactive screen, you could touch one of those things if you wanted to add your comment to something that's Palo Alto centric or something that's global, and you'll see some of those want to bounce back and forth because there'll be some interaction. And so you can link your comments to, for instance, a news story and start that dialogue. And your comment does not have to be related to a story. You can go in and say, I love that the street out front was repaved and it's such an improvement, and see if that generates other comments. But the things will constantly move and change. This is a very speeded up version of it, but the idea is that it would activate the space and be very, dynamic and soothing and ever changing. So that's the little sneak peek I have for you. For the design direction, to be clear, this is not the final of what it'll look like, but I wanted to give you a little glimpse of what some of that is looking like.
Then will the things where you have, because these are separate panels,
Mm-hmm.
will they just sort of move across like?
They will flow through all of those.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So purposefully, when those those monitors were chosen, they have sort of the smallest bezel we could find.
I think it's gonna look great. So,
So
when
cool.
so let's say it's something said. Is it news stories and or comments? Because if it's a
Mhm.
news story, is it just a headline? You don't click through or anything and actually see a story.
No, it would be a leader of a story.
Got it, okay. And their plan is to what's the plan to scrape those titles to feed them into this thing? Are they hand done or are they?
No,
It's automated.
they're
Oh, okay,
working on
good.
that automated. I don't have the details on that.
Okay, so if this just we're commenting on the design, I think design looks
This,
great.
yeah, this is just to give you a sense of the look and feel of it, because it has evolved from some of the original renderings that that came forward, and some of you were not on the commission when that first came forward. So I wanted to share that with you.
It is very soothing to have that
Mm-hmm.
full wall and a panel.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice.
Nice.
So that's it. So they have ordered their equipment. They've done most of the programming, so they'll need a couple weeks in studio after the equipment arrives. So we're waiting for that date to do programming and troubleshooting, and then they'll be ready to come up here and install. So when I was hoping to have an update on the schedule for you tonight, I do not, but I will be sure to pass it along as soon as we know when to anticipate the piece launching. And we'll have to celebrate that as well.
Yeah.
Lee, can you remind me that is it all done through the web, or are there actually local servers for them here?
They will have a computer here,
Okay.
and they are using the city's network also.
Okay.
So that's it.
Very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Great.
All right. I think we are through our agenda, so we need to adjourn.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Meeting adjourned.
One of these guys.
8 o'clock.
That's for you.
Great.
We all got.
That's from the Commissioner Recognition event.
I love it.
Look at this. You have a proclamation.
8 o'clock. Dead on.